Welcome back, everybody, to Nobody Listens to Kevin, a podcast where I tell you the truth about life and relationships that you are not going to hear anywhere else. The title of today's podcast is a fun one. It's called Space is Bullshit and Better Ways to Communicate. Ooh, I'm going to make a lot of people pissed off with this episode, but I'm also going to make a lot of people happy. So listen, before you're like, I need space and this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, just stick with me, okay? There are reasons that space is acceptable, but the general concept of taking space is a very destructive one. So let me explain what I mean here. I've got a client. I gained her permission to talk about this on the podcast, so I'm not violating her confidentiality. But to protect her anonymity, let's call her Sarah. I've been working with Sarah for about a year. And when I first met with Sarah, she was a person who was very insistent that when things happen, whether she has a fight with her family or her friends or her significant other, she needs space. And that the way that she collects her thoughts, the way that she decompresses, the way that she is able to then come to the table and have a conversation is by basically siphoning herself off into her little silo where she goes into her shell. She doesn't talk to anybody. She doesn't return any text messages or any calls, and she can just sort of think, right? Now, that sounds fine in concept. It's particularly conducive for not being reactive and not getting in a fight with whoever the issue is with. And it's a respectable thing to do if when an issue occurs, you have the ability to walk away and basically hold your tongue. But there are a lot of problems with this. And we've taken the idea of I need space and we've extrapolated it out to something that has become very problematic. So I want to explain what's an acceptable version of space and what is actually problematic. Now, before I continue, it's important to note that there are two types of people when it comes to relationship issues or communication issues. There are people who need space, and there are people who need to resolve the conflict right now. Admittedly, I am in the latter camp. I am a person who likes to resolve the conflict right now. So what I'm saying may have a slight bias to it, and I'm admitting that because I belong in that camp. But I'm also going to tell you my shortcomings. I'm going to tell you what the issues are with being in that camp and how we can mitigate this so that the person who wants to resolve it right now gets their needs met, and the person who needs to take space also gets their needs met, and we don't end up really hurting, abandoning, or annoying each other. So back to Sarah. When Sarah first came to me, she would insist that in order to process conflict, she needs to take space. And what I would always tell her throughout our sessions, throughout the months of meeting together, in a nice way, is you don't need space. Space is for people who cannot communicate their emotions. What you need is the ability to tolerate discomfort and connect what you are feeling to your words. Those are two completely different things. I need space means I need to go into a room, I need to shut everyone out, and I need to deal with this issue by myself. But there are a lot of problems with that. The first problem is operative word, by myself. When you're in a relationship, or when you're in a business partnership, or when you're in a friendship, if there's a conflict, there is no such thing as by yourself. If there's a conflict, you need to work that issue out with the other person, right? We don't have issues with ourselves very often. That's why people stay single for so long, because it's only in a relationship with someone else that you start experiencing these communication issues and these conflicts. So your insistence that you're going to take space and you're going to process it by yourself, and you're going to deal with it by yourself and then come to the table, is reinforcing a very unhealthy emotional pattern, which is hyper-independence. Believing that emotionally you are your own regulation system and that emotionally you are on an island. So you return to that island to regulate your nervous system and to collect your thoughts, etc., etc. And then once you have done that by yourself, even though you are in a relationship where another person is supposed to be involved, then you'll come back to the table. The other issue is that while you're doing that by yourself, you are completely abandoning this person. So not only are you reinforcing the unhealthy emotional pattern of independently dealing with your issues rather than relying on your partner to help you with that, but you are also taking their bundle of needs and how they feel and the fact that they want to communicate, and you're completely throwing it out the window. Now, the converse of this is that that person who wants to deal with the issue right now, right here, if they're blowing you up, they might be really annoying you. They might be really turning you off. They might be imposing their will on the person who needs to take space. And that's a problem too. That's why I said we have to come to a healthy balance where both of them get their needs met. But this person who wants to communicate about it right now, at the very least, is not committing the act of abandoning their partner. In other words, one person is trying to come toward the relationship. The other person is trying to turn away from the relationship. And the person who is trying to turn away from the relationship is always in the wrong, right? The person who's coming toward the relationship, they might not have the right approach. They might need to chill out. Me, for example, I'm a person who needs to learn how to calm down and take some space and not always jump right into the heart of the conflict, right? But at the very least, I'm going to be somebody who's turning toward the relationship. I'm still in the position of caring about my partner's feelings and wanting to resolve the conflict, while the person who is taking space is in the position of saying, I don't care how you feel until I've had my space. And that's very, very wrong to do. Now, as promised, earlier I said that I would talk about when this is acceptable and how this is acceptable. So, if you're a person who just needs an hour or two to calm your shit, that's fine, right? It is acceptable to go into your shell and to listen to some music or just think to yourself and then come back to the table. That's very different from taking space. And it also requires a very different approach. Taking space means you say to your partner, I need space. I'll come back to you when I'm ready. That is unacceptable. There is no universe in which that is acceptable unless the person has cheated on you, lied to you, yelled at you, abused you in some way. Unless what the person did was really, really horrible, there's no situation in which it's acceptable to say to your partner, this person that you love, who trusts you with protecting them emotionally, I need space, I'll talk to you when I talk to you, okay? What is acceptable is to say, hey, listen, you know that I'm a person who gets emotionally overwhelmed. So I love you and we're going to resolve this, but I just need an hour. Is that okay with you? Then you are in a position of leverage because then it's on the person who wants to talk about it right now to step up and meet you halfway. Then it's on that person to say, okay, it's really hard for me to do that, but I respect that that's what you need. If you communicate your need for space in a healthy and loving and reassuring way, now the onus is on the other person to step up and give you that space, quote unquote. The reason that I'm putting the space in air quotes is, again, it's not that you need physical distance. It's not that you need time. It's that you need to tolerate the discomfort you are feeling And you need to learn how to communicate that discomfort in your words. Now, that is a skill for some people that takes a lifetime to build. And because people don't know this and they don't know how to explain it, they just call it space. But it's not actually space, because being apart from the person, if you're just apart from the person watching, Sex in the City for 3 hours, and then you come back and you sweep everything under the rug, that space didn't do anything for you. You just chilled out during that time, right? But if you're taking an hour or two apart to really think about what's going on and to decompress emotionally and to introspect and reflect what you need to be doing differently, why this conflict happened, what you want to ask of your partner. If you're tolerating those emotions, perhaps you're doing some journaling, and then you're learning how to express those emotions in words. Sure, maybe it's easier for you to do that while you are by yourself, but that's very different than telling somebody, I need space, I'll come back when I'm ready, I'll talk to you when I'll talk to you, ignoring their calls, ignoring their texts, etc., etc. So listen, the phrase distance makes the heart grow fonder is extremely destructive to relationships. Distance does not make the heart grow fonder, it just makes the heart grow more anxious. And it just sows the seeds of relationship dysfunction. So if you need to calm down and chill out and process your thoughts for an hour or two, because that's how you work, and because you are learning how to tolerate uncomfortable emotions, and you're learning how to put it into words, then that's acceptable. But if you're telling the other person that you need space, and then you're totally disregarding what they need, then you need to reevaluate how you deal with relational conflict. If you think this would be helpful to somebody that you know, please send this episode to them. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me anytime.